会有2场的发表啊，第一位是许玉老师，好，然后他会讨论非物质展的在脉弱化啊，跟里欧塔的展览有关系。然后第二个发表是金喜英教授哈，然后他的演讲题目是揭开陈创历史、白南准跟捕炫基的早期创作。那每位发表时间是30分钟。好，那我们先请徐老师先开始，好，掌声谢谢。
Okay, so I'm going to speak in English because I think you understand my English more easily than my Chinese, my 普通话. When I look at so first of all, I would like to thank Professor Chan for the invitation and also for the organization and support of Spring Foundation. But yesterday, when I looked at the program, I was really embarrassed because I'm neither art historian nor archivist. And apparently, when Professor Chan invited me, he didn't mention that it's about East Asia art and Taiwan. So I had to. So yesterday, I had to rewrite my talk a bit, and I think that because Professor Chan insisted me to give a talk on les immatériaux, so I think that I will have to be very provocative. So that's my role, to be provocative on that. So let me say a few words about the archival turn and multiple modernities, which is the theme of this conference. And I'm very skeptical that we can really talk about multi-modernities as a kind of resistance against the Eurocentric discourse of modernity. In fact, I even doubt that there is such a thing called modernity in East Asia. If we understand modernity as an European legacy since the 17th century, which is characterized by an epistemological change which radically reconfigured the scientific and aesthetic view of the world. The epistemological change, accompanied by its technological product, allowed Europe to universalize scientific and political knowledge, which led to the situation that I call disorientation. Now I put a hyphen between this and orientation in order to grant this word a double meaning. On the one hand, one lost orientation. On the other hand, orient ceases to be orient, which leads to a superficial globalization that we have today. Further to this, if we understood that there have been different modernities in East Asia, what kind of relation could we have with the postmodern elaborated by Jean-François Lyotard? If the postmodern for Lyotard is necessarily a historical shift, as well as the self-negation of the modern, how can we make sense of the shift from the multi-modernities of East Asia to the postmodern? Will it be the same negation that Lyotard has perceived? Or the postmodern bears no meaning to East Asia since it does not have continuity with the multi-modernities in Asia. What is really in this process that we call postmodern? If I bring up this controversy here, it is because I'm convinced that the notion of modernity must be problematized, and the question of globalization must be reassessed according to a new concept of world history, which is neither a Hegelian one of theodicy, which he brought from Leibniz, or a synchronized time access through technological means. This new concept of world history can only be possible when we are able to reinvent our tradition in order to reappropriate the technological progress. While before we are able to reinvent our tradition, it is necessary to avoid seeking for equivalence like what one does regarding the notion of modernity. Translation, I believe, must not be a task seeking for equivalence, but rather a task which asserts and affirms differences. It occurs to me that the archival turn must be politicized in order to serve the purpose of opening a new world history. Archive is a reconstruction of history and memory, since it is always already a selection and interpretation. Archive is by no means a collection of whatever historical remains. While going through the archive of Les Matériaux, an exhibition curated by Thierry Chaput and Jean-François Lyotard in 1985, a postmodern exhibition, if we can call it, that is a research project that I have done with the historian Andreas Borchmann between 2013 to 2015. While going through the archive of the exhibition and the work of Jean-François Lyotard, it gave me a strong skepticism towards any non-European modernity. At the same time, I was very much concerned with the question of sensibility and modernity. To put it in 2 points, firstly, the rediscovery of an epochal sensibility, and secondly, the possibility to reflect on the question of sensibilization, which puts forward new social and political imaginaries. In the remainder of the talk, I will try to recontextualize Les Matériaux as both a transition of history and Lyotard's own thinking, on trajectory of thinking, and hope to reflect on its relevance to the archival turn. Because there isn't much documents about the exhibition, I would like to play a few minutes from a documentary on Les Matériaux, so you can have an impression of it. So I will only play like 1 to 2 minutes.
Complètement différents les uns des autres.
So this is the exhibition, the entrance of the exhibition.
Ici, un long silence. Il n'y aura plus de jeu. Il ne dira plus jamais jeu. Il ne dira plus jamais rien. Il ne parlera à personne. Personne ne lui parlera. Il ne parlera pas tout seul. Il ne pensera pas. Il ira. Je serai dedans. Il se laissera tomber pour dormir, pas n'importe où. Il dormira mal, à cause de moi. Il se lèvera pour aller plus loin. Il ira mal, à cause de moi.
Nous sommes entourés de messages. Ces messages sont transmis par des matériaux, c'est-à-dire qu'ils sont transportés sur des supports. Par exemple, en ce moment, je vous parle et le message sonore est transmis par de l'air. Vous me voyez, le message visuel est transmis par de la lumière. Les choses sont en réalité plus compliquées parce que vous me recevez sur des postes et ça veut dire que et les vibrations lumineuses et les vibrations sonores ont été transformées en impulsions électroniques. Pour arriver à un résultat aussi convenable que possible, il a fallu prendre des tas de mesures, des mesures d'éclairage et des mesures de son. Et donc mon corps a été transformé en objet de mesure. C'est une relation qui tend à se généraliser. Relation de l'humain avec notre corps. C'est le cas par exemple dans toute l'observation médicale contemporaine, et c'est aussi quelque chose que fait l'entraîneur sportif. Donc notre rapport à notre corps change. Il n'est plus un rapport immédiat qui est celui d'une chair en relation avec un milieu immédiat. Il est celui d'un objet, support de message contrôlé.
Right, so that gives you probably an idea of what a little bit of idea what the exhibition looked like. So what I'm going to do in the following session is I'm going to talk through the question of sensibility, which was a central topic of this exhibition. Before we come back to the relevance to what we want to discuss about Asian modernities. Now, the question of sensibility is fundamental to the whole conceptualization of les matériaux. But however, what kind of sensibility? The postmodern consists of a sensibility towards the transformation of the material world and a new form of aesthetic experience which interrupts the modern conception. As we have heard from the video, that it wants to provoke a feeling of insecurity, anxiety, uncertainty, so on and so forth. This sensibility is motivated by the material transformation of the world, including telecommunication, bio and chemical technologies, which significantly change our way of perceiving materiality. The title, The Immaterials, does not really mean that there is an immateriality, but rather the immaterial is the new material. Lyotard decided to name it Les Matériaux instead of new materials because he wants to present a break with the modern. If it was called new materials, then it would be only a continuation of the modern perception, but not necessarily a postmodern one. We may want to remind ourselves that Lyotard was a part of the linguistic turn when he took up the curatorial work, which has actually started a few years ago and got suspended for some reasons. He just published Le Différent in 1983, a book dedicated to the reading of Wittgenstein and Kant. The question of language was hence fundamental to Lyotard's conceptualization of this exhibition and also materiality, because telecommunication technology has created a new materiality of language between senders and receivers, or more fundamentally, it serves as the material basis of the postmodern. Now, there was an article in Le Monde, response to the exhibition, and was criticizing it, and Lyotard has responded, who is afraid of les matériaux. The communication model of the immaterial is for Lyotard a means to dissolve the substantial understanding of being that we can identify, for example, in the hylomorphism of Aristotle, as well as in the Tao substance of Descartes. The self-grounding figure of human is subverted by its own technological exteriorizations. Interaction, a term that was closely related to the new technology at the time, was frequently employed by Lyotard to describe a possible new metaphysics within which the human subject is totally dissolved and conceived as no more than movement of particles and activity of waves. This conceptualization allows Lyotard to develop an ontology of the material or immaterial according to a model of communication, as we can see from this picture. Firstly, matériel, medium, matériel, receiver, maternité, imita, which means motherhood, matière, referent, and matrice, code. So he divides mat, which is material, but it has etymology, which means to make with hand. Now, the objects and artwork in the exhibition, as well as the 60 sites at which they were presented, were also classified and ordered according to these 5 categories that I have just named before. At the entrance, there was an Egyptian bas-relief sculpture, followed by a long and dark corridor, as we have seen in the video. Visitors had to wear headphones and listen to the soundtrack playing different programs of spoken text in 26 different zones throughout the exhibition space. So these are some of the exhibit objects in the exhibition. As we can see, that this is artificial skin. Now, this is a robot in the car factory. So this is about perfumes, artificial perfumes, and these are the famous Minitel, which is the French version of internet at the time. So this is also about something become quite popular nowadays in urban areas. But imagine that was made. There was an exhibition of 1985. So I'm not going to exhaust the objects displayed in the exhibition, since. But just to give you an impression of what it is. Now, the exhibition, as Lyotard prefer to call it, a manifestation or a non-exhibition, is a demonstration of the epochal change which is exhibited in the new way of material construction of the world, which take the visitors into disorientation. And I emphasize the word disorientation here. The visitors do not feel comfortably being at home, but rather like Alice in the Wonderland. To put it more generally, it presents a liberation from the shackles of rules, code, oppositions, and especially of the modern. A celebration which was evident in almost all domains listed in the exhibition: alimentation, perfume, architecture, urbanism, art, astrophysics, biology, genetics, writing, habit, mathematics, money, music, theater, dance, etc. The setting of the exhibition is probably the best illustration of this. It presents us with a labyrinth in which every object is at once familiar and strange. Envisaging the construction of the exhibition space, Lyotard proposed to go back to an idea of Denis Diderot, who, when reviewing the painting of Claude Joseph Vernet in the 1767 Salon, presented them not as pictures to be viewed following the traditional logic of division of gallery space, but rather described them as real sight in the form of disorientations of spaces. So this is the way they cut the space. This is also part of a project which invites 50 famous writers, including Jacques Derrida, Bruno Latour, Michel Serres, I think, and they are using the Minitel computers to do a collaborative writing. So someone wrote an article, for example, Derrida, and you can see that Bruno Latour was commenting next to it. But think of it, this is something that we can do easily today, but it was more than 30 years ago. That is François Châtelet, a philosopher who was also writing who has participated in this project, Les Preuves d'écriture. Now I go back to now I come to the third part, and then we conclude. Les Matériaux, in my view, is not only the demonstration of such a sensibility that we have just discussed, but also an attempt to sensibilize the epochal change and to turn it into a new experience based on a new epistemology or even a new metaphysics. The project of Les Matériaux moves away from a political and social use of technology to more profound interpretation. However, it is by no means a simple interpretation, but rather a manifestation of such sensibility. In other words, is sensibilized. It makes felt. It attempts to articulate a sensibility which moves beyond its own source, namely modern science and technology. Lyotard's famous 1979 postmodern condition report on knowledge was a response to another report titled Informatization of the Society, authored by two information scientists, Alain Minck and Simon Nora, who proposed national strategies to master the newly emerging telecommunication technology, which to their eyes is going to subvert our life. However, it may worth going a bit further, since already in the early 1970s, Pontus Hutten, the first director of the Centre Georges Pompidou, has proposed informatization of the museum. Hutten has indicated in the 1975 text titled Le Musée, Lieu de Communication, Museum, Space, Place of Communication. He says, it is a veritable science of information is in the process of being elaborated correlatively to a new orientation taken up by science and human sciences, art history, informatics, cybernetics, linguistics, and semiology. It puts concepts of theory, history, space, and time, and science into question. Lazy Material didn't invoke a direct conversation with Rutten, but it is possible to conceive a link between the two, and Lyotard's efforts to mobilize the sensibility in order to go beyond the mere technological rationality. The disorientation that Lazy Material presents problematizes the established aesthetic and epistemological paradigm. Here lies a dilemma. Since if the postmodern is made visible or sensible by techno-science, considering Lyotard was describing the beginning of the digital epoch, this very technology also presents a danger of totalization which leads to an inhuman system. The word inhuman, like the Kantian sublime, is both a negative and positive concept. It is at the same time barbarian, but also that which is closer to me than myself, like God, in Augustine's Confession. Inhuman is also the title of a book that Lyotard published after Lazy Material, which contains, to my opinion, reflections of Lyotard on the exhibition itself. I would like to return to our discussion on the postmodern and Asian modernities, and I hope to show that one will be trapped once one perceives a shift from the Asian modernity or multi-modernities to the postmodern, and it is possible and necessary to conceive another temporality and historicity. I refer here to an article titled Logos and Techne, or Telegraphy, which is originally a paper Lyotard presented in a workshop organized by Bernard Stiegler in 1986 at the ICAM of Centre Pompidou, a year after the exhibition. Lyotard addressed the question of technology and memory. He presented a key concept of Freud, and I think that is important for us to perceive another concept of archive from what I'm going to explain about Lyotard. Now, he presented a key concept of Freud, namely Durcharbeiten, usually translated as working through in English or pélaboration in French, but here Lyotard translated with another word, passage, which is translated into English as passing in the translated version of the book. So I keep the word passing here. The term Durcharbeiten is used by Freud to describe a clinical practice which, unlike hypnosis, aiming to recover previous memory, helps the patient to, but rather it helps the patient to pass into act and to resist. So that's the difference between the two. The central argument of Lyotard is to elaborate on a rather speculative question. If the new technology, instead of imposing stronger synthesis than the earlier ones, will they allow a passing? Now, this is a very important question. The whole question of his whole essay is this: is the passage possible? Will it be possible with or allowed by the new mode of inscription and memorization that characterizes the new technologies? Do they not impose synthesis, and synthesis conceived still more intimately in the soul than any earlier technology has done? And I think this is crucial to address the question of archives. Lyotard was uncertain of a definitive answer, if not even the question itself, which for him remains too dialectical. However, this après-coup of Lazy Material seems to me very relevant to the Archival Turn and Asian modernities, because Lyotard is questioning if the new technologies, and that we can say digital technologies today, provide excellent tools and medium for retaining traces and archiving. Will it be able to give us another historical sensibility? And by doing so, Lyotard returns to philosophy as a means to sensibilize. It is worth paying attention to a passage in which Lyotard invokes the Japanese monk Dogen Lyotard attempts to compare what he means by anamnesis, which is passing, Durcharbeiten, with what Dogen calls a clear mirror in Shopo Genzo, the classic of Zen Buddhism. Now I would like to read this really speculative and curious passage from Lyotard. It makes sense to try to recall something, let's call it something, which has not been inscribed if the inscription of this something broke the support of the writing or the memory. And borrowing this metaphor of the mirror from one of the treatises of Dogen's Shopo Genzo, the Zenki, there can be a presence that the mirror cannot reflect, but that breaks it into smithereens. A foreigner or Chinese can come before the mirror and the image appears in it. But if what Dogen calls a clear mirror faces the mirror, then everything will break into smithereens. And Dogen goes on to make this clear. Do not imagine that there is first the time in which the breaking has not yet happened, nor that there is then the time in which everything breaks. There is just the breaking. So there is a breaking presence which is never inscribed nor memorable. It does not appear. It is not a forgotten inscription. It does not have its place and time on the support of inscriptions in the reflecting mirror. Now, why Dogen? Why Dogen, a 13th century Japanese monk here? This passage from memory to the clear mirror is for Lyotard a challenge to modern technology, but at the same time a hope that the new technological system will allow an anamnesis which is fragmented and open, instead of being closed, totalized, and submitted to synthesis. How can we assess this passing from the postmodern technology to the clear mirror, if such a clear mirror is considered to be pre-modern, when we follow a unified chronology of world history, namely pre-modern, modern, postmodern? I would like to suggest that the relevance of Les Immatériels to the archival turn is double here. Firstly, in what way can we evaluate the relation between archiving and the passing Lyotard was proposing by way of Dogen? If archive is considered as memory, then it is necessarily support of anamnesis. If the anamnesis that Lyotard talked about is desirable, then it means that one will have to transform the concept of archive as a mere accumulation of ordered traces or reconstruction of memory to one that allows us to access to something else, like the clear mirror. But where? A question that we have to ask ourselves. Secondly, how can we understand Lyotard's reference to find passing demonstrated by Eastern thinking to go beyond the limit of modernity and its means of inscription? Because modernity is also implies a melancholia in which archive become necessary, that sometimes we call it collective memory. But what happens in this passing that Lyotard wanted has raised? And Lyotard is by no means expert of Eastern thinking. But if the East wants to respond to the limit of modernity and postmodernity, in what way can we reassess our tradition in view of the archival turn? Is a turn towards multiple modernity and appropriate description? That is my question. I think that Lyotard found us the best means of sensibilization. It is aesthetic and cosmic. I emphasize also cosmic experience allows us to give a new framework to technological traces, to illuminate the possibilities opened up by the new technological epoche, and epoche in the sense of phenomenology. For example, digital technology of our time. Now, in my recent book, The Question Concerning Technology in China, I try to show that it is necessary but not sufficient to retrieve this force from tradition. Instead, one will have to reinvent tradition and to appropriate modern technology by creating a new episteme. I have no time to explain my proposition, but I will simply conclude by saying that this epistemic creation is what I understand sensibilization in Lyotard's discourse on lazy material, and I believe what Lyotard was trying to achieve in this exhibition, meaning to sensibilize the postmodern. Lyotard's question seems to me a crucial task. I show the question again. Lyotard's question seems to me a crucial task for any future archival studies. To conclude, I invite you to reflect on Lyotard's final remark on his hope in logos and technique or telegraphy, written 30 years ago, and that which I have taken seriously. I will stop on this vague hope, which is too dialectical to take seriously. All this remains to be thought out, tried out. Thank you very much for your attention.
大家好. It's my great honor to get invited to this, to participate in this exciting seminar today. I would like to express my gratitude to the support of Taipei Fine Arts Museum and Spring Foundation for providing me with this great opportunity to join the meaningful, really meaningful discussions, as well as for the generosity and kindness given along the detailed process of the event. I would also like to thank Professor Po-Shin Chang and other individuals' time and effort to organize this wonderful event. I'm also really thankful for this opportunity for me to open up some discussions on two Korean video artists, and I actually, through this paper, I start to look back to the earlier work of this artist. Media technology has governed us humans on various aspects of our lives, including ways of modulating seeing and hearing, and the discourses that govern modes of thinking, acting, and expression. Media studies have recently suggested the geology of media, a particular kind of temporal and spatial materialism of media culture, which could refer back to cosmology and geology. Not confined to a traditional notion of media as non-human devices, it opens up the idea of earth, light, air, and time as media. In the history of art, the task of representing the nature in certain media has been essential. Materiality of media in art is critical since it reveals the traditional relationship between humans and nature. Contemporary media art has emerged from the layered history of the interactions between media, art, and science. In understanding media art, there is an archaeological urge to uncover the layered history that offers a way to engage with the past in a non-linear way, avoiding the narrative definite origins and seeking variations in history. Drawing on this view, I'd like to look at the earlier works of the two Korean artists who employed video as medium. Against the backdrop of the common assessment on the two contemporary artists, I would like to pay attention to the artist's intention with their work at its initiating stage. With the progressive experiments of Namjoon Paik, the idea of art has been fundamentally challenged, and the technological media have been integrated into art. In addition to the traditional medium of art, the notion of art as a representation of the nature, stating nature, no longer claims the supremacy. Turning away from the modernist aesthetic of the autonomy, media art addresses temporality and variability in nature, while blurring the borders between mediums, matters, space, and time. Focusing on the earlier stage of experiments with video during the 1960s and 1970s, I would like to look into the different ways in which Namjoon Paik and Hyun-gi Park understood electronic technology and video as art medium. The two Korean artists' works are often characterized as meditative, spiritual, Zen-related, or nature-oriented, which usually identified them as Asian. However, I would like to uncover the ways in which the two artists explored electronic technology in such distinct ways that their works seem to defy the generalizing classification of video art. Their work reveals their different background, personal interest, and cultural and intellectual environment. Despite comparable video installations by the two artists, they had different takes on technology. With his background in music, Paik understood the revolutionary potential of electronic technology, which would subvert the modernist aesthetic. Referring to cybernetics, Paik stressed the new relationship that could be possible through electronic technology. Paik explored the concept and practice of intermedia, which was promoted in the context of Fluxus. His experimental activities performed in Germany and the United States were informed to Korean artists and made a remarkable impression. While taking Paik's preceding experiments, Hyun-gi Park tried to articulate his own questions on representation by embracing video. Trained as painter and later architect, Park had a particular interest in the relation between object and natural environment. Park utilized the medium of video to address the questions on representation, on the relation between the real and image, the material and the immaterial. He seems to have allowed differences coexist as distinct entities. Considered as the father of video art, Namjoon Paik's work has been generalized as video sculpture or video installation with an emphasis on its sculptural components. Although it is important to acknowledge that Paik replaced the paint on canvas with a cathode ray tube, thereby creating innovative images, Paik's early experiments await more discussions and reveal his understanding of music as a fundamental inspiration for his art. Namjoon Paik's early experiments grew out of his interest in music, which would later lead him to integrate the mediums of video, television, laser, satellite to his art. I want to examine the 1963 exposition of music, electronic television, held in Wuppertal, Germany, as a seminal event that manifested Paik's approach to music, art, technology, and culture. The two events of homage John Cage, music for tape recorder and piano in 1959, and the Symphony for 20 Rooms in 1961 would be precedent for understanding the legendary event at Wuppertal. Park once said that, "I've got a hangover from music. It looks like as though I could handle a music videotape better than someone with a visual arts background. I think that I understand time, processes, kinetics better than a video artist with a visual background." Trained as a musician, studied art history and aesthetics, Paik opposed the separation of genres as he said that art history and musicology suffer too long from the separation of the inseparable. Technical division of work, Veltlin's obsession with style, all these toils kill the subject of the study before studying. Rather, he suggests the vision of mixed media in which the study of various arts should merge two into one by the qualified investigator who is a specialist in his own field but possesses a thoroughly sound and trained acquaintance with the fields of his neighbors. His involvement in Fluxus activities also encouraged him to expand his experiments in a wide range of possibilities while blurring conventional boundaries of disciplines. Upon getting a degree in aesthetics with a thesis on Arnold Schoenberg at the University of Tokyo in 1956, Pike went to Germany to study 20th century music. While first studying at the University of Munich and then with the composer Wolfgang Furtner at the Conservatory of Music in Freiburg, he explored the use of tape-recorded sounds in his compositions. In 1958, Pike first met John Cage while attending the International Summer Course for New Music in Darmstadt. Since then, Cage and his work came to be lasting influences on Pike's work. Soon, Pike enrolled in the University of Cologne and began to work at Westdeutsche Rundfunk's studio for electronic music, where Karl-Heinz Stockhausen was working. In 1959, Pike developed his homage to John Cage, music for tape recorder and piano, performed at Gallery 22 in Düsseldorf on November 13th. Jean-Pierre Wilhelm, a Fluxus activist and gallery owner, explains Pike's new approach to music. Quote, "Our universe, the very place of our existence, becomes music, sound and tone through and through. Pike liberates us from atonality, from any systematics. What he's giving us is pure sound. We come to realize that the rattling of a few cans on asphalt pavement is worth more than Beethoven's Ninth Symphony," end of quote. For Pike as composer, homage at John Cage marked a new phase of his musical work. While studying German musical aesthetics, Pike realized that there was no fundamental answer to the question, what is music? Except that music is merely a sequence of events in time. He also thought that the artist's role was to challenge accepted social norms and to destroy conventional social and musical values. Homage John Cage initiated a phase of action music in which Pike attacked musical instruments. His destructive performance was not intended to amuse the audience, but to eliminate traditional music and performance practices. He considered pianos as taboo objects to be destroyed, mistreated, or abused. His effort to change the superficial forms of the piano could be assessed as both a destruction and construction. Pike's radical questions posed on the notion of conventional music led him to pursue his bold experimental events in the early 1960s, which would set him apart from other composers. As to homage John Cage, Ernst Thomas provides first-hand report of the event. Quote, in this music for tape recorders and piano, the most bizarre things happen in 5 minutes. There are owls of electronic noise, eggs splash against the wall, a motorbike clattered off, a musical box tinkles, the radio blares out political news, Pike plays journey-like exercises on the piano, a rosary flies past my head. An old piano has to produce its last sounds on strings that have been torn out. Then it is hurled over with a thunderous noise. Suddenly, there is a silence and complete darkness. And finally, Pike's unyielding face, illuminated by a stump of a candle. The working formula is collage and montage, end of quote. In this unconventional event, beyond the overt actions involving screaming toys, tin boxes full of stones, eggs, smashed glass, a live hand, and a motorcycle, there were serious philosophical and musical purposes, as Pike stated that the elevated and the ugly are inseparable. Therefore, every listener has to behave as though he had just heard the St. Matthew Passion for the first time. Michael Nyman stresses the performance was backed with a type of a tape collage made out of a mixed bag of classical and non-musical sound sources, which was then pioneered by Pike. It was consist of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, a German song, a news announcement, a lottery announcement given over the phone, a recording of a toy car, a prepared piano, and so on. Pike spent 80% of his time on the tape and sound components of the performance, which aimed to deconstruct the traditional understanding of music. Yet, it turned out that people paid attention to several actions. Pike expected that his crafted tape collage would have more impact than his actions. With this event, he intended to complement Dada with music rather than making music. Thus, he demonstrated destruction and directed aggression against the musical instruments. He provoked the audiences and also invited them to his happenings. While having explored an audiovisual and intermediate synthesis, Pike's performance ideal was variability as a necessary consequence of intensity. Pike aimed to bring his work to life for only a fleeting moment. As Dieter Runte points out, it is not Pike's intention to create an oeuvre. In Fluxus' Spirit, Pike had once told Cage to have his manuscript and his tapes destroyed when he died, but Cage felt that this would be overly dramatic. Pike thought it a crime for Cage to produce tapes at all. Pike later stated that the best part of Cage's creation is his live electronic music, which is a whole time-space art, which can never be made into either audio or video disc. Pike radically extended these starts motivated by Cage, and then pursued his experiments by blurring the conventional boundaries of genres and bringing disparate elements together. He stated that he was tired of renewing the form of music, serial or aleatoric, graphic or fine lines, instrumental or bel canto, screaming or action, tape or live. I must review the ontological form of music. In the normal concert, the sounds move, the audience sit down. In my so-called action music, the sounds, etc., move. The audience is attacked by me. End of quote. Homage John Cage initiated Pike's significant exploration to expand the notion of art while utilizing the format of a collage, inviting the audience's participation, embracing noise and technology. The structure of exposition of music, electronic television is supposedly conceived in the Symphony for 20 Rooms, which was first shown in the spring of 1961 in Cologne. The sketch for the piece shows that Pike had established his way to handle time and space. In this piece, he wrote, quote, "The audience has a choice of at least 20 different sound sources between which they can freely circulate. The free time leads the music necessarily to the space-time, space music, room music, because the free time requires more than two vectors, directions, and two vectors constitute necessarily the space, which is room. In this case, the room is no longer merely the enrichment of the sound, but the indispensable better half of the sound." End of quote. Pike proposed the next step toward more indeterminacy. He wanted to let the audience set and play by itself. Therefore, the sounds, etc. move, the audience moves also. To provide the audience with the freedom to play, he did not perform music but exposed the music. Pike made various kinds of musical instruments, object sonores, to expose them in a room so that the congregation may play them as they please. The published score of the Symphony for 20 Rooms shows that each of the 16 rooms has its own music, visual, dynamic, lighting, and occasionally heat, smell character. In each room, various types of sounds could be heard from machines or be made by direct audience participation by utilizing vast ranges of means, natural or industrial, professional or ordinary. As Nyman assesses, Symphony for 20 Rooms was a genuine symphony in its all-inclusiveness and formal spatial organization. That is, a symphony in the etymological sense of many things sounding together. In early 1963, Pike purchased 13 second-hand televisions, and on March 11th presented his first solo exposition of music, electronic television at Rolf Jarling's Gallery Parnas in Wuppertal. Supposedly developed from Symphony for 20 Rooms, this exhibition was shown in an enormous scale, occupying many rooms, including 13 altered television sets, 4 prepared pianos, and room installations. As the title suggests, it had 2 themes of music and television. One part of the exposition of music manifested the logical step with which Pike demonstrated the traditional understanding of music. The first part consisted of 4 prepared pianos. Actually, this is kind of announcement flyers, and he printed these letters on just newspaper, Japanese or Korean. It's kind of interesting material. And I'm showing you some of the slides for each room. The first part, this is one of the first part. The first part consisted of 4 prepared pianos, 2 double record players, 3 audio tape arrangements, random access, and many objects shown as sound object, in part named Zen for Wind. So this is one of the Zen series, Zen for Wind. And Namjoon Pike at the exhibition, arranging things. And this is the installation in every corner of the gallery. So this is prepared toilet. And this is Zen chair. And this is just bathroom installation. And another view of the exposition of music. And he also performed the various kinds of something that relate to Zen, Zen for walking. And also, he's trying to listen to music through the mouth. And the slide on the right shows the actual. And Joseph Beuys attacking a prepared piano. I mean, he joined the participation performance. So he is kind of attacking the piano. So Pike explored the question of moving sounds around, or allowing the audience to move around sounds, or allowing them to produce sounds with special designed installations. Thus, Pike characterized the exposition of music as a situation wherein the sounds sit, the audience plays or attacks them. According to Thomas Schmidt, Park's collaborator then, it was more like a performance, a potential performance, because gallery visitors were encouraged to participate. It included performances such as listening to music through the mouth by Pike, or improvised action by Joseph Beuys, who attacked a prepared piano with an axe. There were 4 prepared pianos whose cases and keyboards were packed with toys and objects. This is clavier integral, was devised so that the piano, a symbol of classical music, could be played in a completely different way. Another piano, this is a detail of the clavier integral. And there is another piano which is laid down to expose the keys and strings. Part of it was hammered and viewers were allowed to tread on it. Another one, covered with electronic cables and wires, was transformed with all sorts of everyday objects suspended, stuck and nailed onto it. The transformation would give the visitor an unpredictable experience that will affect all the senses. In part, the piano keys had functions like switches for lamps, sirens, ventilators, radios, and film projectors. Pike's piano is reminiscent of John Cage's prepared piano, which was modified to broaden its function and to redefine its sound potential. However, Pike considered the piano merely an object because his music is not necessarily played on the keys alone. There were record players and sound tapes with which the audience could make sounds at randomly chosen spots. In addition to Cage's idea of the prepared piano for the altered pianos, Pike's reformed record players, audio tape recorders were inspired by another concept of random access. While drawing on the term random access from computer terminology, Pike suggested a procedure which made it possible to have the same access to all the information on one magnetic tape of a computer. So this one, or this kind of random access as well. And the second part of the presentation, electronic television, is now considered as a milestone in the history of video art. The title, Exposition of Music, Electronic Television, suggests a visualization of music by means of electronic technology. Considered the first television exhibition in the history of art, this show included a room of Pike's prepared televisions. Despite the diversity and differing impact of the object displayed, the television sets were dominant in that they created the basis for the video works that later led in various directions. By bringing television into the realm of art and presenting it as tactile and multisensory medium, it marked the incorporation of the medium of video into his art. Pike had already shown his theoretical and artistic interest in television in a 1959 letter to John Cage. He wrote that, quote, "My new composition is now 1 minute for Professor Fortner. I use here color projector, film, 2 to 3 screens, striptease, boxer, hand alive, 60 years girl, light piano, motorcycle, and of course sounds, 1 TV, whole art in the meaning of Mr. Richard Wagner." End of quote. When the televisions were removed from their customary position as a home entertainment appliance and scattered around the room, they became objects to be manipulated and transformed by the artist. Pike used the television as a means to produce a new electronic image, which he did by applying magnets to the surface of the television and reworking the electronics of the interior. He remade the television, exposing its mechanics in order to create an abstract image. 13 black and white television sets were exhibited in one room, which indicated their relatively isolated position considering the diverse aspects of the exhibition. Placed on the floor in an arbitrary manner, all the televisions were tuned to the same program. 2 of the televisions turned out to be defective after the transport to Wuppertal. Thus, one of the 2 was placed with a screen facing the floor. On the other, the picture was reduced to a horizontal line. Pike was inspired to turn it 180 degrees and call it Zen for TV. The other televisions were manipulated and arranged in 3 groups. The first group was 4 televisions to show the abstract forms by disintegrating broadcast picture. The second group belonged point of light, to which a radio was connected to generate the pulse. If one turned the volume on the radio up or down, the one shining point of light in the middle of the screen became bigger or smaller. An audio tape was hooked up to a Cuba TV, which made the picture bigger or smaller depending on the tape's amplitude. In the third group, foot-operated switch was connected to a microphone whose impulses were conducted through a sound amplifier and created fireworks of points of light on the screen. In his experiments with the distortions of television, Pike explored the technical possibilities of the medium to nullify its one-directional character, thereby creating more possibilities of intervention. Pike tried to relate the televisions to his idea of audience participation. Communication was crucial for Pike, as he states that art is the oldest form of communication. However, the television room did not attract the serious critics' attention. Instead, what had received so much attention was a cow's head, fresh from the butcher, hung above the entrance door. While having noticed the televisions in passing, critic Siegfried Bonk wrote about the cow's head as representing an ongoing act of sacrifice on a self-made altar of visual acoustic totality, the normal conception of art as divided into different branches. However, what Pike meant by the cow's head was to get the audience in a oneness of consciousness so they could perceive more. While the art critics associated the volatile exhibition with the Neo-Dada, televisions went unnoticed or misunderstood. As to the lack of the attention to his televisions, Pike states that one bull's head made more sensations than 13 TV sets. Maybe one needs 10 years to be able to perceive delicate differences of 13 different distortions, as it was so in perceiving the delicate difference of many kinds of noises in the field of electronic music. For the exhibition, Pike also stated that electronic television is not a mere application and extension of electronic music into the field of optics, but it is much more than they represent a contrast with electronic music, showing a fixed, determined tendency in both its serial compositional method and also in its ontological form. Pike characterized that a television image could not be controlled or fixed by the artist in any traditional sense. It was therefore deterministically determined. With the exhibition of televisions, Pike intended to address indeterminism and variability, which was, as is stated, the very underdeveloped parameter in the optical art, although this has been the central problem in music for the last 10 years. He considers indeterminism as a core in the thought of the 20th century, from Heisenberg via Sartre to Cage, reflect also on Norbert Wiener and Marshall McLuhan. For Wiener, indeterminism was in entropy, a classical terminology of statistics, and for McLuhan, indeterminism was the cool media with low definition, end of quote. Considering that Pike was interested in the issue of indeterminism of life and our communication, it is probable that time and variability would be the most essential elements in his art. He was always changed his works, used the parts for new works, and adapted ideas. Even in the presentation of old works, he has not clung slavishly or even retrospectively to old forms, or even bothered about the authenticity of the first appearance, but about the best possible execution at a particular time. The exhibition of music, electronic television went largely unnoticed at the time, and it manifested Pike's radical position as composer and artist who was eager to explore variability and embrace electronic technology. To understand his vision with the exhibition, it is worthy of noting that from 1961, Pike also built on personal rubbish, which includes a newspaper article on the 60th birthday of physicist Werner Heisenberg, reprinting his research on the innermost features of matter. He must have used this to inform himself about the unified field theory of elementary particles, about those field operators independent of time and space, who reveal the distinction between elementary and composite particles. He also studied electronics magazines, got hold of circuit diagrams for radio and television sets, and made a personal list of the commonest computer command abbreviations. Following his work at the WDR Studio for Electronic Music in Cologne, he had subsequently familiarized himself with electronic devices, signal manipulation. After he moved to New York, he befriended a physicist, Young Jin Young-jin, who helped him to enrich his interest in matter. Upon Jin's death in 1967, Pike made a drawing on a long scroll to record his fond memories about Jin and to express his gratitude to his mentorship. This drawing or notation is reminiscent of the fact that Pike's music is not necessarily played on the keys alone. While acknowledging Wiener's concept of cybernetics, Pike predicted the replacement of a heavy industry by the electronics industry, which would parallel the gradual freeing of the idea, the pure thought from the material. The exposition of music, electronic television provided a basis for all the techniques and concepts that Pike drew on later. It made his position as a composer separate from other avant-garde composers and even Fluxus composers. After the exhibition, Pike traveled to Japan later that year. Pike performed his compositions and met Hideo Ukita, an electronics expert who introduced him to the electronics engineer Shuei Abe. At this time, Pike and Abe constructed robot K456, a remote control robot that walked, talked, and defecated. The construction of a robot grew out as part of the counter-cultural movements of the 1960s, although Pike made a significant contribution to the use of technology in art. So he also wanted to make machine ridiculous. Because of the time constraint, I'm going to just briefly summarize the rest part of my paper. So my point is that although he used the television or video as the medium, but his later work actually expanded more than just images on the screen. So this is another exhibition in 1965, kind of embracing the idea of cybernetics. And whereas actually I didn't get into the second artist, Hyun-gi Park. I took his art as an example of the localization of the kind of universal discourse of the reception of the Western technology and modernization. And although Hyun-gi Park saw Namjoon Paik's work, Global Group in 1973 in Korea, but he thought that he couldn't follow Namjoon Paik's path, and he took the medium of video as another way to represent nature. So this is, although there are some videos that shows his performance, much later work, but this is typical Hyun-gi Park's video. So he actually saw Global Groove in 1973, but he realized that he should take a different path, focusing on more of the Koreanness or Asianness. So this is one of the reflection. This is just mirror placed on a river. So actually the mirror reflect the mirror, the floor of the water. And actually we can think about that as under the context of the conceptual art. And this is another work by Hyun-gi Park. So he tried to juxtapose the real stone and the image of stones encased within the video. So actually this is another work that actually go parallel to his video, kind of tower, and also TV fishbowls. And he continued on the play with the actual matter and the image of the matter. And he continues on this type of work, the video totem pole. And the later work, he just shows the waterfall on the wall project. So I really sorry that my paper is too long. So the main point of my paper is that the two artists had a really different approach or understanding of the medium of technology and also medium of video. And so I tried to kind of uncover hidden stories of the artist, and maybe the generalizing or orientalizing discourse on these artists as Asian. Maybe we can talk more of the other the fine layers of the two artists. I think maybe I took so much time. Thank you.
那我们刚刚结束2篇论文发表，那就有大概15分钟时间，请各位可以踊跃发问。
Okay. Let me first of all say thank you to both of the speakers. And my question goes to Hee-Young. For Lyotard, the immaterial means does not mean dematerialize. It exactly means something new materials. From this perspective, we can see that it seems that Lyotard possess a quite positive attitude to technology. And to recontextualize Lyotard's exhibition under the contemporary debate on new materialism, my question is about what is the attitude of Lyotard concerning the agency of the matter itself, the agency of the material itself, beyond human view. Can the materiality be manipulated, reformed, and even archived? Through your research, what do you would you like to respond to this question? Thank you. 我用中文讲一句吧，就是我代表灵异哲学发问，就是关于我想问许玉，就是Lyotard怎么看物质的能动性和技术的关系？谢謝。
Is it working? Thank you very much for the question. I think for Lyotard, there wasn't so much discussion about agency, because he wanted to understand. Well, actually, when he talked about new materiality, he wanted to understand it in terms of language. So you can see that there are 5 maths that I have shown. So in the way that even human being can be decomposed into the interaction of waves or particles. So that is his view. And but you at the very beginning you said that he, of course, he was very positive, and that is what I'm trying to show. That with this new materiality, he wanted to demonstrate and to emphasize on a new sensibility. Now that is the sensibility of the postmodern. And the exhibition itself was a means to sensibilize through technological means. Now that is a very important point of Lyotard, and I think that was really, people were really obsessed at the time in the mid-1980s. But when we look at what has happened, I mean a few years up, 1 year or even a few years after, especially when we look into those articles that he has published in Human, where a book published in 1988, but it includes articles published in 1960s or 50s or even earlier. Then we see that there is a kind of doubleness where the celebration of disorientation, which characterized the postmodern, was questioned into on the one hand, so that he called inhuman. For this reason, he called it inhuman. But inhuman is both a positive and negative concept. It can be a barbarian technological system, closed archive, or kind of system of memory. But it is also a way that when he says the inhuman, he refers to St. Augustine's concept of the God. The God is what is closer to myself than me. So that is so there is doubleness there.
请问还有任何问题吗？ Any questions?焦老师。
好，我想第一个哈，就是非常感谢两位讲者啊，这次给我们一个非常，我想说在这个思想上面哈，或者说在这个物质性上面给我们很多的一个启发这样。那我有2个问题哈，第一个是针对徐玉的这个部分，因为提到因为这个题目当然是我有点指定它哈，就是有点不好意思，但是因为你的去年的这个出版哈，让我们觉得非常有意思，是说里欧塔他的这些想法哈，跟当时80年代中期哈，在法国的这个艺术界哈，在美学上面呢，其实我们会看到一种可能性哈，那这个可能性就是说，除了在科技上面、科学上面的这些新的发展之外呢，在物质性上面让它有了一个新的方向，是说可以用策展的方式啊，就是说展览它作为一种档案建构的方式，可是它又不是只是单纯在做一种实证的档案，而是透过策展的方式去开展出一种我们对于档案的一种新的物质性的思考。所以我很想听听看，说你就一个研究者的角度哈，现在事隔这么多年再回头来看这样的一个展览史的时候，策展的这种方法呢，究竟它有没有可能成为，就是说呼应哈，或者说去回应这个里欧塔他自己本身的这个思想上的一种物质形式，哦，这是我第一个问题。第二个问题，我想请教金教授哈。因为刚刚时间有点来不及哈，那真的很想要听您多谈一下这个Park Hyung-gi 的这些他的这个实践哈。那当然，因为他们都是就是 Park Hyung-gi 跟这个白南准哈都是韩国人哈，那血缘上是这样没有错。可是当今天放在一个东亚艺术史的这个架构下的时候，这个他们面对的问题可能不太一样，因为毕竟环境不一样哈。整个在面对韩国的这种当代艺术，特别说70年代以来这样的发展的时候，录影艺术啊，我们说早期讲这个录影艺术跟雕塑哈，跟这个雕塑的这个物质性上面，在韩国本身的这个语境上呢，您是不是可以提一下说 Park Hyung-gi 他们想要处理的问题，到底跟白南准有什么不同？好，谢谢。
Thank you for the question. Is it working? Sorry that I should use my time more wisely. I spent most of time on Pike, but actually for the subject Archival Turn and Park Hyung-gi Park's work actually shows our discussion today about the Archival Turn and also the multiple modalities in East Asia. So, in terms of the genre of sculpture, maybe they used video as a part of their sculptural component, but for me, although Namjoon Park's work is more, better represented as a sculptural installation, and most of the successful work in market is a video installation or video sculpture. But I think his idea about art is more than just video. Sculpture, maybe sculpture that has video. And for me, Hyung-gi Park's understanding of the video could be an aesthetic expansion of the genre of sculpture. So maybe I simplify their work too easily, but for Hyung-gi Park, it's more of the aesthetic exploration of the medium. But for Namjoon Pike, it's not just about the confinement of the art gallery or any medium of art. It's more of the social expansion of the network. So although the beginning of their work, although the beginning of the work is different, because the 60s Pike and late 70s for Hyun-gi Park, so there's a kind of gap. But Hyun-gi Park took the element of video is more in aesthetic domain. That's what I understood. Hope that answered your question.
So thank you again for the question. If you raised this question, it means my talk was not clear enough to you. What I'm trying to say is that I don't think that in this exhibition there was a concept of archive. I think it's rather a concept of non-archive, of non-archive. Why it is a question of non-archive? Because I think that there is a direct relation between modernity and archive. Why? Because modernity is what orders. Modernity is what organizes. And but here, what he was trying to say and to break from modernity and the whole discourse about postmodern is to challenge this desire of organize, this desire of order, of ordering. And I think that it is in that period. I mean, this morning someone raised the question of Derrida on the question of difference. And if we look at what Derrida was talking about, Mas de l'archive, it was really about the question of challenging this way of organization, the totalitization, which I called archival metaphysics. That something has to be challenged. So you see, we see here that what Lyotard was trying to do, and the disorientation that he tried to show in the show itself, in terms of because there were artwork like from Duchamp, like from Yves Klein, so on and so forth, but most of them are actually industrial objects, scientific objects. They are not organized. They were organized according to different places, which in turn is according to the 5 categories of materiality that we have seen. And what I was trying to hint on at the last point about the question of Dogen is exactly the necessity to think beyond archive, to think to pass from archive to something else. But it doesn't mean the archive is not important. Archive is crucial, but it is necessary to go beyond that.
谢谢，我们还有5分钟。来，费老师。
对不起，我那个对这个非物质展览，我想说几句，因为非物质展览是1985年做的，可能是那个时候很快就是我有朋友是在那里参展的艺术家，然后他告诉我这个展览的消息，然后我就在中国的刊物上发表出来了。然后86年我到法国的时候，也跟他们的策展团队见过面，然后也有他们的画册，当然这个画册我没仔细看了，但是我的理解，如果非常简单的说的话，这个非物质是什么？那么我觉得许一老师一直没有说到一个词儿，这个词儿对我来说是很重要的，就是非物质，其实就是 information， 就是我们生活在一个信息化的时代，我们所展览的对象是信息，而不是物质，这个非是非在这个地方，但是我刚才听下来，这个许老师完全没有说到这个词儿，这个可能是我理解错了，请许老师再讲一讲。
No, actually, I talk about informatization of society because that was actually a response to. If you look at La Condition Postmoderne of Lyotard, published in 1979, it was a response to another report, which is actually published as a book, Informatization of Society. It was a response to that. And I also talk about the question of informatization of the museum by referring to Hutten, the first director of the Centre Pompidou. But here we have to be very careful because for me, I agree with you, and I prefer to say that the immaterial is information. But it is not only information, it is more than that. I tend to think that it is because it was the beginning of the digital epoch, and I tend to think it was information. But then many people will not agree. They disagree with me. But because if we look into that, for example, with the artificial skin, the second skin, or the artificial skin robotics, and or other kind of chemical and biological material that Lyotard present, of course we can say reduce them finally to information. But it is not simply information, because information also needs the material support. Information needs material support. And that is the crucial point here, that that Lyotard understand information and all these kind of entities as the composition of 5 words that originate from the epistemology, etymology of math. No? So then they can be considered as a mode of interaction. So it's not simply information here, it's a mode of interaction between the sender, receiver, and there is code. Also there is a support. So it's more complicated than simply information. I have to emphasize on this point.
我们大概还有1分钟，如果还有观众要提出问题的话。那如果没有嘛，好，那如果没有的话，我们就谢谢今天台上2位金老师跟徐老师的精彩的发表。那我们休息，谢谢。